Corsair Clockworks, Chapter 1, in which Andrea Corsair is late from school. There was a certain song used solely by Clockwork. Andrea Corsair knew it well. She had heard it for many years in the creations of her father, clockmaker and music box artisan by trade. How long she had spent in his workroom, absorbing the melodious click-click-clacks of gears and tat-tat-tats of rotating cogs. When the storefront was full of product, the sound was a metallic symphony. "There is music," her father once said, "in everything, if you care to listen." How right he was, perhaps more than he knew. While her father's music boxes were his pride and joy, and delightfully harmonious they were, his clocks played her favorite tunes. Andrea would sit in his workroom with her ear pressed against the side of a timepiece just to hear it sing. It was difficult to describe how their steady rhythms soothed her, but they did. The years of careful diligence, studying their melodies, had led her to even notice the faintest off-key notes, and like a violinist learning to play by ear, she learned how to tune her father's machines. Her long fingers held tools precisely, adjusting the fine instruments. Though her sight had difficulty focusing on distant objects without spectacles, her golden hazel eyes were perfectly suited for sharp focus behind magnifying loops. So it was that Andrea grew, from childhood to the age of 17, listening to the songs of machines. Saint Emile was an advanced city, with automated conveniences reaching more than just the noble classes. Street lamps that needed no oil, seamsters used machines for rapid stitching, nearly all of the city had automated plumbing, and even some of the newest horseless wagons had arrived on the smooth brick roads. The ancient clock tower in the center of the square was all but drowned out by the advances of bustling, modern contraptions. However, Andrea would always pay her respects to the stone tower rising from the courthouse, hearing its slow talks as though the grumblings of a grouchy elder. There was music in it, after all, and she certainly cared to listen. "Miss Corsair!" A sharp voice rang through the room. "Do you even have the slightest ability to listen?" Her mind returned to the moment, jumping at the sound of her instructor, Mrs. Castleberry. Soft giggles followed, and Andrea felt her face turn violently warm as she unconsciously shrank in on herself. Yes, Mrs.?" "Posture!" the matron barked. Andrea straightened instantly, her glasses nearly falling askew from the sudden movement. Mrs. Castleberry was the instructor for music, etiquette, history, and language arts for the small ladies' school that Andrea attended. There were little more than 50 students, split up into 3 rooms, and the instructors would switch between them for various studies. While Andrea could easily memorize dates and specifics in history, it never failed to impress the matron. Her back, always as straight as a column, made Mrs. Castleberry all the more imposing and accentuated her height over every single one of her students. As tall as she was, it was impossible for her to not stare down at her charges, and she had a particularly condescending way of doing so at some. She was incredibly beautiful for her middle age. Her dark hair was perfectly coiffed, tight curls held in pins in a graceful crown around her head. On her face, only the most elegant of creases around the corners of her full mouth and the edges of her slender, long-lashed eyes hinted at her age. She had the sort of face that had remained pristine through the careful process of not smiling. Not that she would ever have reason to smile at Andrea, it seemed. Yes, Mrs. Castleberry?" she forced out, but already regretted the decision. "And stammering like a fool as usual," she noted. More giggles followed from the other girls, and Andrea fought every impulse to desperately sink into her chair and be forgotten. "So I will ask again, Miss Corsair," the instructor said coldly. "At an intimate get-together, what would be the best topic of dinner conversation?" Now Andrea recalled why she had been focusing on the wall clock instead of lessons. This lesson was dreadful in every way. What in the name of the divine had the teacher been saying? Something about topics to avoid. "Tick-tock, Miss Corsair," she pressed icily. Oh, if only clocks were the right answer, Andrea would have so much to say on the matter. She already knew that absolutely anything she found interesting would be forbidden at any table of consequence. Finally, she only stared in her lap. "Ah, Miss Corsair," Mrs. Castleberry leered. "By this point, I would honestly be so disappointed if you managed to rise above the very bottom of expectations. Surely the sun would cease in rising." Her cheeks burned hotly, and there was the faintest of whisperings. Andrea was certain that Rosalind, Edwin, and Mr. Dale didn't think that Andrea could hear them, but she could. It was a knack she had, perhaps from always listening so intensely to machines, but she could hear the lightest sounds without even the slightest effort. "Do you think she'll be failed for sure?" "I should hope so. She doesn't belong here. Her father uses his hands, after all." Andrea's entire frame grew tight, her hands clenched at her skirts. While talk behind her back hurt, and she always caught every word, no one had the right to speak ill of her father. Her father was an artisan and not a merchant or clerk or lesser noble, this was true, but how dare they, as though being good at nothing were a better lot. However, the context behind Andrea's sudden, minor movement was lost on the matron. "Join me after class, Miss Corsair," Mrs. Castleberry all but growled. Not listening and being too thick-skulled to retain a speck of information is expected, but don't think I'll tolerate disrespect, or that I won't notice it when it is right in front of my eyes. Andrea's jaw went slack, and her eyes jolted up to stare dumbly at the teacher. "And shut your mouth, unless you plan to catch flies." Chalk dust covered Andrea's school dress, a consequence of filling each of the long boards with the phrase, "I will show my teachers respect," and then being tasked with cleaning them, along with the erasers. The white powder covered the tips of her fingers, and her hands felt dry and cracked. The entire time she had thought of the heroine of one of her favorite books. Just like the matron in the book, Mrs. Castleberry would eventually be forced to eat her words when it was discovered that Andrea had a rich, powerful patron who would be disgusted by the way she was treated. Let's see how she'd enjoy being a chimney sweep when she was disgraced out of teaching. Furious tears finally filled her eyes as she made the trek back home. She wanted to sob openly as she walked sullenly, but it would look absolutely childish of her to do so. She was 17, not 5. Her younger sister had left the school long ago, around the time that classes were supposed to be done for the day. Julia arriving home first only meant Andrea would hear more from her mother the instant she got in. Even worse was yet to come. No, Andrea told herself. She was not in the mood for a lecture just yet. As she trotted down the streets, lit in the late afternoon sun, she wiped her nose on her sleeve. Today was too awful a day to face any further without a few moments of some distraction to ease her spirits. The cobblestone streets of St. Emile were alive with activity, from the casual strolls of the merchant class to the prattle of the streetcar vendors and mechanics working on the horseless carriages parked on the sides of the road or the street lamps. Andrea jogged by it all, feeling the tug of the strap that held her books as it jostled against her happily. She reached the front of the corner building that the Corsair family owned, the 2-story building that housed both the shop and their home. It was old, having passed from Andrea's great-grandfather. The gray stone was worn, though the warmly stained wood had been replaced when Andrea was a young girl. The window situated directly above the sign that read Corsair Clockworks was she and her sister Julia's room, and the windows to either side were the empty room her brothers once occupied and her parents' bedroom. She paused only a moment, then quickly rushed her pace to pass it. In her eagerness, her buttoned shoes nearly slid on the sidewalk, but she steadied herself and avoided a well-dressed couple who started in surprise as she hurried by. Andrea slipped in between the alleys of the buildings and entered the grassy plot that the owners of their block shared. Sparsely lining the paths between the various businesses and homes were stone paths, scraggly grass pushing up between the stones. Andrea lifted her skirts to jog past the longer bits of grass and arrived at the familiar clothesline that her family used. It was not laundry day, so the lines and basins stood empty. She finally came to a stop in front of the window that led to her father's workroom and rested a moment against the wall. After a short breather, she preferred books over sport, she pulled herself on top of a crate propped against the wall beneath the window. Her father was never good about throwing away such things, insisting they would find a later use, and she at least had found one. It was the perfect way for her to sneak into the workroom without having to pass through the front of the shop first. Her parents must have had a sneaking suspicion, but thus far had said nothing on the matter, nor moved the crates. On tiptoe she eased the window open, then with a light jump, Andrea peered into the unlit room. The brief look aloud showed her the room empty, and she smiled slyly. The room lined with shelves had no occupant, and her father's latest project sat openly on the main table surrounded by tools. A second hop and a heave to aid her brought her into the window frame, her waist precariously balanced on the window sill. Awkwardly she struggled to get her arms fully in, and felt herself grunting and panting as she adjusted her book strap in order to ease it down. Gently her school books plopped on the floor, and this freed her hands to steady herself. As Andrea began to ease her hips into the window, strands of her hair fell over her eyes, quite a few having fallen out of the thick braid encircling the back of her head due to her fevered activity. She puffed a few breaths to move them aside. Then her stomach nearly leapt out of her throat. Her eyes had just locked with her mother's. Her mother stood in the doorway, a completely expressionless look on her face. Andrea was often told that she was the spitting image of her mother, and this she found absolutely laughable. Her mother's hair was like spun gold, not the dry straw that Andrea saw her own as. Her nose regal and straight, whereas Andrea's turned up slightly. The posture was perfect, expression royal, an hourglass shape after even 4 children, while Andrea's figure looked like a boy's even in a corset. If the two were comparable in any way, it was that Andrea thought her mother had to be the image of what anybody like Mrs. Castleberry wished she could be. Certainly nothing like the girl in a dust-covered school dress, mussed hair, and hanging halfway through a tall window, undoubtedly giving the across neighbors ample view of her backside. Andrea's eyes shifted back and forth, her glasses dangling toward the edge of her nose. Mother, I, didn't want to bother you in the shop." Her mother let out a sigh, a loud, long one. Silently she walked into the workshop, took down a clock perched on one of the shelves set aside for repairs, and turned to leave. "We will talk later, Andrea." As her mother disappeared back toward the shop, she swallowed hard. Her mother's calm disappointment had been a far worse greeting than shouting would have been. Just how unsurprised she had looked. With so much of her enthusiasm drained from her, Andrea eased through the window. She flopped on the floor, an all-new cloud of dust sprang up from the floor. She coughed and sneezed, and gradually pulled herself to her feet. A new sullenness tugging at her movements, she brushed off her dress and shook out the hem. She pushed aside the fallen strands of hair and straightened her glasses. For a few moments, she closed her eyes and stood motionlessly. She stilled her breathing and focused. Slowly the school day melted away, the disappointment, the dust, the hot, stinging tears. They drained away, and all was replaced by the feeling of her father's workshop. The scent of machine oil and metal filled her nostrils. The whirring and ticking of cogs on repaired clocks, the pungent odor of lacquer used on music boxes, the stillness. For now, there was nothing else. She opened her eyes anew and turned her attentions to the thing she had been daydreaming about all day long. In the center of the workbench was a mute bird. It was completely still, perched on a gilded branch set atop a deeply red lacquered box. In the light drifting in from the workshop window, it glistened, its polished and sealed gray surface accentuated by gold. Despite not being made of flesh and feathers, it still held a picturesque delicateness to it. It appeared eager to fly away, and while that would have been quite a sight, Andrea was much more anxious to hear her sing. Several of the panels for the case had not yet been fitted, allowing Andrea to peer inside the inner workings. With a long, fine set of tweezers, she turned gears in the motors, watching them move by degrees. She could already imagine what the song of this bird would be. What a fine duet it would make, the moving parts within the bird and bass and the perfect plinking of the cylinder and teeth. A sound caused Andrea to start, and she quickly dropped the tool and folded her arms over the table. Her father entered the workroom, adjusting his own square spectacles as he neared the workbench. "And of course, here you are, Andrea," he chuckled with a warm smile. He adjusted his long leather apron over his girth, a comfortable artisan he was, and paused beside her. "You've not taken your eyes off my little songbird since I began. I dare say you know her better now than myself."
"How can I help it?" she sighed wistfully, gazing back at the bird. "She sings so beautifully," she added in barely a whisper.
Still loudly enough for her father to hear. "Sings, Andrea? She doesn't even have a cylinder yet."
At this, Andrea blushed shyly, but thankfully father asked no more on it.
"Speaking of which," he began as he rolled up his sleeves, "Master Nicholas shall be coming by shortly. Hardly worth his time to see a bird that can't sing, he finished with a warm smile. Despite her father's smile, a sinking feeling dropped in the pit of Andrea's stomach. Her father had made friends with something of a celebrity in St. Emile, the mage Master Nicholas, who served the baronial manor. Andrea was unsure if the name was his surname or given, as the oddity had never made it clear. While many mages shunned the use of machines and ether-run devices, Nicholas was eager to get his hands on every new gadget he could. Thus he had arrived in the Corsair clockwork shop and had fallen deeply in love with her father's work. Andrea could still recall that unusual day nearly 2 years prior. Nicholas was every bit the prototypical mage. Shoulder-length, shaggy black hair with no bother to pull it back like a gentleman, or even brush it properly, and a gold, heavy gilt ring on his right hand. Never a ring on the left, always bachelors. Nicholas was all the more striking because even in the dead of summer he wore entirely black. Black calf-high boots, black pants, a long black coat with caped shoulders, and a black vest with cravat. Certainly to afford such rich dyes for the entirety of his wardrobe he was of idle wealth. Her first impression of him, though, had been that he carried his familiar with him, a massive, disgusting, bright green serpent that sleepily wound his shoulders like a slimy stole. She had been very grateful to have been on the other side of the counter, and therefore far out of its reach. With an eager smile, Nicholas had asked her father to explain much of the merchandise. Usually this was Mother's forte, as father was skittish and stuttered when nervous. However, with Mother being on errand, there was little choice, and father walked the mage around the shop. To both father and Andrea's surprise, Nicholas asked very technical questions, showing that his interest in the pieces was more than simple fascination. Father eased into familiarity with the mage quite quickly, even as hours passed and father had long tried to return to work. The mage was content to chat and mill and chat further, paying no mind to the paying customers, nor to Mother's impatient looks when she had returned. As night fell, the mage showed no signs of leaving, and father no signs of forcing him. He left only long enough to return with several bottles of wine, a basket of vegetables, and a full wheel of cheese. Thusly, having invited himself to dinner, Mother fumed between tight lips as Andrea and her sister Julia ate in awkward silence. The chatting went on through the meal, and finally the maid shook her father's hand, kissed her mother's, and bid she and Julia good night. It was as the mage stepped out into the night and out of hearing distance that it seemed Mother would finally erupt. "Adolfo, that was shameful!" she had snapped at him with the minimal calm she could manage. "I know you have trouble saying no, but you even let that lunatic into our house?" Still waving, father had turned to her with a look that said even he was confused. "He did purchase one of our most expensive music boxes. That was Master Nicholas of the House of Antares." Mother's jaw had visibly dropped, which she quickly covered with her hand. "We have a royal contract," he finished, stunned. "Make sure you have a good lunch ready for tomorrow." From that day forth, things had changed for the better in their home, so Andrea couldn't honestly complain. Her father had been absent from the shop frequently, but always because Nicholas had found another audience to show the Corsair wares. Her father had never done well among large groups, certainly not affluent ones, so the mage's accompaniment was appreciated. However, it didn't mean that Andrea was ever pleased to see him. He was overbearing, still had no concept of how to brush his hair, and carried his familiar at all times. The shuddering, slithering tongue sprouting from its bright green snout sent shivers down her spine with only the memory. Coming here?" Andrea pressed, hoping perhaps her father would be meeting Nicholas elsewhere. Sensing her unsaid concerns, Father allowed a small smile for her. He donned his jewelry-making loops and produced the musical cylinder from his apron's pockets. I know he's a bit odd, he began with an idle chuckle. He leaned close to the base of the music box, studying the inner workings and making adjustments with his tools. But really, what else can be expected from a master magus? He is not so bad once you speak to him directly, he added.
Andrea watched her father work eagerly, studying the way his calloused, thick hands became delicate and nimble whenever he worked with his tools. Almost like a dancer's motions, his movements were fluid as he picked up minuscule parts with elongated tweezers and inserted gears deftly. He is the one I have to thank for the idea, after all, Father continued in a low voice. He thinks differently than someone who only knows machines. He thought differently than a great number of people, Andrea added internally. Music, Father mumbled. That only reminds me. He sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose under his glasses, giving his eyes a momentary respite before returning to the clockwork innards of the stand. Your mother tells me you're having trouble in your music class, and a few others. Is that right? Painfully, Andrea grimaced, and by degrees even a forced smile was too difficult to hold. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Reminded of that day in Mrs. Castleberry, along with the condescending sniggering of her classmates, the peace of her father's workshop was not enough to lift her spirits. Her love of music was largely metaphorical. If sat in front of a piano or handed a recorder, the results were unpleasant, to say the least. Far worse results occurred through any attempt at singing. Such things as tone and pitch escaped her, made all the worse by the catty giggling of her fellow classmates or the impatient glares of the matron. At least it seemed Julia had not informed her parents of the events of the day, though the school would be informing them soon enough. For now she was safe. Thankfully, her father was never one to press on the matters of her school. He seemed as baffled by her coursework as herself, and so wouldn't be so harsh on her as mother. Now, forget I mentioned it, dear, he assured her with a wave of his hand. He removed his loops and placed them on the table. There, he said with finality, that should do it. I know it will cheer you up. Why don't you install the cylinder for me, then? Andrea's face beamed, and a smile instantly spread across her face. Are you sure? It's only the last thing, he said with a chuckle. Go on. Your face says it would do you good. All the good in the world, she agreed, nodding happily. To be trusted with something so important, to be the first to hear the songbirds sing, it were as though not a single wrong thing had happened that day at all. Adolfo? Her father turned his head, facing Andrea's mother in the doorway to the workshop. Her face was calm as she gently rested a slender hand on the doorframe. The Magus is here. He waited for Mother to return to the shop, then glanced over his shoulder at Andrea. Go on. With the way I've seen you work, it should only take a moment for you, As he disappeared through the door, a gleeful giggle escaped her. Not only was she getting the chance to place in the cylinder, but the Magus would be there to see her competence. Surely the next presentation would have her beside her father. To house the cylinder, the bird was practically life-size. The bird's chest cavity was where the cylinder would reside. It was Nicholas's idea to have the sound emanating from the bird rather than the more spacious base. The base instead housed gears that ran a minuscule series of chain pulleys that would cause the bird's head and beak to move as it sang. The whole of the bird and base's innards were masterfully complex, which would make any further pieces affordable only to the most decadent. If the birds became popular, then Corsair Clockworks would be the standard of amusements for the noble and wealthy classes. Not that there was any pressure to get this bird just right. Andrea's mind still reeling with possibilities, she tried to focus on the clockwork figure in front of her. This was no different than any other music box, she told herself. With delicate fingers, she eased the cylinder over the position, then quickly plucked up a set of tweezers to precisely move it against the comb. A rattle followed, and Andrea cocked her head to the side. That hadn't sounded right at all. A twang of metal, and then a violent pop. The bird's head tumbled off his shoulders, followed by an energetic spring. Her heart stopped. She gawked at the poor beheaded avian, and a dry, hollow sound rolled out of her throat. Distantly she heard a voice approach, but like a rabbit caught in a snake's gaze, she was completely frozen in a mix of despair and terror. Have the piece all but finished and ahead of schedule. You'll see. Her mouth still hanging open, Andrea slowly turned and faced her father. He blinked dumbly at the sight of the bird's head lying sideways on the table in front of her, along with the spring. Oh dear, he murmured, placing his fingers against his lower lip. Oh, that spring. His face said that he was not angry in the slightest. If anything, the sigh he let out was resignation. I should have caught that a moment ago. Oh, dear, he assured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It's quite all right. I've actually had trouble with that villain spring yesterday. I suppose I'll have to find a different size altogether, even though I really needed that strength. He mumbled under his breath, surveying the damage as Andrea tried to choke back another bout of tears. When she sniffled stiffly, he finally noticed and smiled painfully. Oh, no. Don't be upset. It's entirely my fault. You didn't break anything that can't be fixed. I'll explain to Master Nicholas. Why don't you tidy up in the front shop, She knew he was trying to reassure her, but shifting her chores away from the workshop was more like a punishment. Drearily, she shuffled her way through the hall. As she passed the shelves that held various cleaning tools, she plucked off the feather duster. With heavy steps, she went into the shop, passing under the arched eyebrow of her mother's gaze. Her mother still said nothing to Andrea, engaging the magus instead at the front counter. Andrea glanced at the shaggy-haired man, feeling his smile mocking her somehow, his expression mirrored on the glass faces and display cases lining the walls, an entire sea of grins, all of them indifferent to how miserable she was. She trudged to the opposite side of the store and let out a heavy sigh. As she began dusting the wares, she heard her father re-enter the shop and address the guest. I'm terribly sorry, Master Nicholas, he said softly. I thought the prototype was ready, but there was a little problem. It seems... He stumbled over himself, as often he would do when nervous. Andrea caught the immovable grin of the mage in the reflection of the window. Please, say no more, his silken voice rumbled. I was only wanting to see the progress. Her father timidly rubbed his hands. Are you sure? Well, the meeting I arranged isn't for another week. Plenty of time. Instead, he continued, his voice dropping by degrees, how was the progress of the other piece I asked for? A sheepish grin appeared on her father's face, and he readjusted his glasses. The clock is finished, he replied, his voice softening as well. The strangely conspiratorial tone of the two men caused Andrea to turn her head and look to the counter where they stood. Her attentions were turned away from their voices the second she did, as Nicholas's ghastly snake coiled its face over his shoulder. Vivid green against a black caped coat, it very slowly draped itself down his back. Its inky tongue flicked in and out of its mouth, and a tingle slid down Andrea's back, and a tiny utterance of disgust fell from her. Honestly, Andrea... The sound of her mother's voice beside her caused her to jump in surprise and clutch the duster to her desperately. Yes! Mother's lips were tight, and she lowered an eyebrow. I'm sure there's a good reason you avoided the front of the shop to instead climb through the window like some kind of animal. Andrea deflated. Why now? She sighed heavily. And then you break his work? A very, very expensive commission. Father... Yes, I know, she cut her off. Your father gave you permission. Why he lets you play with his work is so much beyond me. They're not toys. I wasn't... Your brother already took up the business, she reminded her, as though Andrea could have somehow forgotten Damien and his jewelry shop on the coast. So what ideas you have going through your head that you'll be doing the same are nonsense. A dry sound echoed in the back of Andrea's throat, and she found herself staring at the floorboards. You're the eldest daughter, and you have your own expectations to follow, Mother continued, holding up her hand to show that she was holding Andrea's green drawstring purse, and she placed change into one of its interior pockets. As though being a proper daughter is somehow a bitter chore, she added low. Of course not, Mama, she mumbled guiltily. Just head off to market. Mama raised her head and placed the purse in Andrea's hand. We've run out of packing paper again, and there's still a little time before it closes. While her expression was firm, it was not angry or spiteful, and there was nothing save more than that quiet disappointment in her warm auburn eyes. Painfully, Andrea nodded, suddenly feeling every drop of that disappointment as a heavy weight on her shoulders. Yes, Mama, she affirmed. and all but defeated, she passed the duster to her mother and trudged to the front door. The bell above the door rang all too cheerily as she exited.